to the local pancake house. And while working there, I met a lot of members in law enforcement, and so struck up a relationship with them there. They would recognize me from when they would ever have to visit Eastwind, and it came to be that I would get a few phone calls if there were kids who were maybe skipping school, were on the verge of getting in a little bit of trouble. They would call me and ask me about certain children. They would call me and say, hey, can you pick them up and bring them to school because that's where they belong? So I did those things a few times. It was just something to do. We all worked together.
That is something that I didn't know. It's just something that kind of blew me away. You were our Terry, and it was simple as that. I had no idea that you were kind of intervening on behalf of some of the teen kids and other kids that may have been just getting into regular teen trouble. Again, I really want to clarify, all kids are kids. Terry said it best just now. And no matter what side of the tracks, quote unquote, you were on, or whether you were fluent or in the projects or not, we all were kind of doing the same thing. We were all getting into the same kind of trouble. So I so appreciate you, Terry, for realizing that and having a heart and compassion and going and picking up those kids and getting them to school and getting us candy and all the many, many things that I could never name that you did for us. You were there with us for about 2 years, and in the life of a child, that is a lifetime. And I've always wondered, because things are blurred when you're a kid. You have like snapshots of memories. I've always wondered, how did you come to say goodbye to us at Eastwind? And what, if any, heart-wrenching or interesting moments did you have or experience with us?
The simple answer to that is that the grant just came to an end.
Okay.
It could only apparently be written twice, and it was written twice. The program at that point was developed, and they were ready to turn that program over because the grant couldn't be written. It couldn't go as is. They were ready to turn it over to another youth organization who was coming into town. I was offered a job in a different capacity as a fundraiser, not as a child care provider or direct care staff. I didn't want that. That wasn't what I wanted, and so I opted at that point to say goodbye because the job was just ending. The job as I knew it was ending. And so the heart-wrenching moments, and I won't ever forget it, walking up the clubhouse for the last time and walking down and again being surrounded by a bunch of kids. We sat on the sidewalk and we cried. We just all sat there and cried. It was a very sad day. I knew I was leaving something special. It was, sometimes you look back at things in life and you think that was really special then. Well, I do that now, but I knew it then, too. I knew then how special it was, and I knew it was coming to an end.
Yes, and for us, it was so special because, again, you humanized us in a way that we weren't used to, and you also brought a sense of community, like I said in the intro, that really was a thread that ran for long after you left. And I remember, and I never got a chance to tell you this, encountering girls that were playing double dutch or things like that, and they'd be fighting over whose turn it was next. And they would say things like, well, that's not what Terry would do. Or Terry said we should do this and take a turn like this. So I don't know if you realized how much you left an impression with us, and the work that you did carried on in its own way through us after you were gone. And no one else that ever came or did any program there compared, I'm sorry to say. And you were a common thread of kindness that was left. That's really what I wanted to tell you. That was something, I don't know if you know that. We talked about you, and you were like the golden rule. Well, what would Terry do? What did Terry say? So I really appreciated your contribution, and I wanted to know if you had any advice for people that may want to work with children, or advice for people that may want to take a chance in their life and do something that is outside of their comfort zone, because you were in the food service industry and you were doing that and being very successful and very busy. Can you tell our listeners about how they might want to find something in themselves, or how to even find something in themselves to step outside of what they know and do this kind of work?
I think don't be afraid to take advice from someone, like my mom's advice to go volunteer. People who have lived longer than us are just wiser, and they know things that we don't know. So don't be afraid to take that advice, and don't be afraid to step outside of your comfort zone. That job I landed there so accidentally, and it was the best thing I ever did. It was where I truly found my passion. So I say do it.
All right, guys, you heard it first and from Terry. And like we used to say, well, what did Terry tell you to do? So pay attention to what Terry told you to do, because there is such wisdom in her experience and in her words. I so appreciate you taking a few minutes out of your day to join me, Terry, and kind of go over a beautiful part in my childhood. You were a ray of sunshine to us, and we appreciate your contribution forever and ever. We are so grateful for the work that you did. Thank you for joining us today on Evolve.
Thank you so much.
All right. All right, guys, that was Miss Terry. I have wanted to talk to her since the moment I started the show several months ago, because she impacted me, as you've heard, in such a grand way. She was so kind. She even took one of my siblings and took him to Maine to kind of experience Maine and show him a different side of culture. And that's something that my mother really wanted us to experience, was various cultures. We are West Indian, even though we were here in America. And so I just love the idea that my brother had that opportunity, and that was afforded to him by Terry. And it was above and beyond the call of duty. So if she's still listening, I want to say thank you for that as well, because that definitely impacted him and showed him a different side of the world. And that is what a volunteer or a mentor can do. When you are dealing with children, when you're working with children, it calls to the deepest parts of yourself. You really have to dig down deep, and you have to make sure that you replenish yourself as well, because you can get burnt out. I've talked to you previously about working with children for many years, and it was off and on. I would have a 3-5 year stint, and then I'd take a break, because, my friends, you do need a break. Those children see straight through you. Those children know you, and they require your best every day. You don't get days off when you're working with kids. You've got to be alert and attuned, because they are so very sensitive. And so if you're doing this work, I wanted to give you a little overview about some terms that I've been hearing about in the kind of metaphysical world about various children. We're talking about crystal children, rainbow children, and indigo children. And about the 70s, early 80s, there was a lot of talk about indigo children. Who are these indigo children? So I wanted to break down the terminology of some of these kids. And for those of you that are parents or in the child care business, I have many friends that are teachers here in the Brevard County area that are in service in this beautiful way, working with a range of children, from special needs to children that are in classrooms to the advanced level children. And they're giving their hearts every day. And I recently sat down and had a conversation with some of them just to see if they were noticing these children showing up in their realm, though they are named something different by the education and school board system. I always approach things from a spiritual perspective. So let's talk about the terms indigo, crystal, and rainbow. They were given to these 3 generations of children because they most accurately describe their aura, colors, and energy patterns. Indigo children have a lot of indigo blue in their auras. Now, I am not a person that sees auras. I feel energy. I'm clairsentient and clairaudient. I hear things, conversations that people are having. I can hear that. I know that may sound crazy, but that is part of what my gifting is. And we all here in the metaphysical community have various giftings. We don't all see colors. That's not my thing. Now, you can go to a psychic fair anywhere and have your auric photograph taken, and it will show you the colors in your aura, or you can be working with a gifted person who happens to see auras and read in that way. But one of the things to know about indigo children is that their auras are actually that color, that indigo blue. This is the color of their third eye chakra. And that's the energy center that is located between the 2 eyebrows. Okay, so when you are seeing an East Indian woman, sometimes they're wearing a bindi, it's called, and that is, and some people call it a dot, sometimes they draw it on, sometimes it's jeweled, but that is in observance and honor of that third eye, a reminder that we are more than just our 2 eyes and what we visually take in and perceive. We are always seeing, feeling sentient beings who are experiencing life in our vibration. So that third eye and that bindi you may see on an East Indian in traditional garb That thing on her forehead is an adornment that reminds her to pay attention to all and not just what she visually can take in. So we're talking back about the third eye chakra, and this chakra regulates clairvoyance, or the ability to see energy, visions, and spirits. Many of the indigo children are clairvoyant. Now, I've worked with some of these children, and in some essence, you could describe me as technically an indigo child if we're talking about the generations. And that can all get really confusing, but I want you to know that the clairvoyance is something that is pervasive. Now, we go into the crystal children. And they have opalescent auras, kind of like a crystal dancing in the sun, that color, with beautiful multicolors and pastel hues. This generation also shows a fascination for crystals and rocks. So they're very grounded. They need to be to the earth. That helps their energy manifest and be directed better. Then we'll talk about rainbow children. Rainbow children radiate rainbow energy, the kind that we were created with, to instill within us health and balance. Now, here's the thing about indigos. They can sense dishonesty, like a dog can sense fear. Indigos know when they're being lied to, patronized, or manipulated. Being an indigo person in my own right, I certainly feel that. There have been times in conversations with people, even when I was a child, and this is one of the things I was talking about in regards to Terry. I felt her energy. She was safe. And there was lots of adults around that weren't always safe. And as a child, you're this little small thing going through the world, and you only have your senses as your protection. You can't fight against an adult. You can't say you're wrong and I know you're lying, because who's believing you as a child? But Terry was safe, and my little indigo self perceived that and knew it. And I knew that she cared about us, and that if she said you were right or wrong, she wasn't talking about any other kind of nonsense. There was no junk in her spiritual vortex. It was just, I'm seeing right and wrong, and that's it. So I definitely sense that. As an adult, I can hear people will say something to me, and this may sound strange again, but people will say something to me, and I already know. I feel their fear. I feel their energy. I feel their anxiety. Sometimes I can hear conversations that are being had about me. It's a very, for dear friends and close loved ones, they know that I do this all the time. That's how I experience energy. This is how I conduct my readings. But it's harder when you're dealing with it and it personally involves you. It's okay to be objective and help a friend or help a client. But when it personally involves you, it does take a little getting used to, because there are times when I want to say, I know what you're actually saying inside your head, or I know what the conversation was, and I have to pretend that I don't, because, how can you dispute what someone's thinking? You really can't, even though I've learned to trust it, and I have been often proved correct. So that's one of the ways that indigo children or people interpret dishonesty or manipulation. Their collective purpose as an indigo is to usher us into a new world of integrity. The indigo's inner lie detectors are integral. And as I mentioned before, this is a warrior spirit, and it's threatening to some adults. When I say that was my experience as a child, and I never understood why, so I just didn't understand. I thought, here I am just being my precocious self. But it was not taken that well, because I'm not a conformist. I just didn't really like all of the rules. I remember being in going to my confirmation as my mother Catholic. I'm going, and the pastor we had was very progressive. We had a woman pastor, Pastor Lynn, and she was teaching me something, and she was saying that women shouldn't teach. We're reading the Bible, and she was saying that women shouldn't teach. And I remember stopping right in my tracks when I should have just been a good girl and been quiet. I've never been that. I said, what do you mean women shouldn't teach and shouldn't be preachers? You wouldn't be here, Pastor Lynn, if you were. And she looked at me, she said, that's a great statement. That's a great question, Monette, but that's just what the word says. So that's what I believe. And I was like, but you're here. So how can you believe something and you are the antithesis of the thing that's being written? So that is what indigo children do. And I can tell you from my experience, I certainly called out a couple adults many times, and that did make adults uncomfortable. The indigos are unable to conform to dysfunctional situations at home, work, or school. They don't have the ability to disassociate from their feelings and pretend like everything's okay unless they're medicated and sedated. Now, here's an interesting thing about the way that our school complex deals with children.